I'm just going to talk about one organism, or it's actually a cooperative between a couple of different pathogens and beetles. Can you see my screen and hear me all right?
Yes, it looks great and you sound great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I give credit on this title slide to Christine Buell. She's an entomologist with the Oregon Department of Forestry. We're learning a lot from the emerald ash borer response plan. And so when we found Mediterranean oak borer in Oregon, we developed a little strategic steering committee with people from Oregon Department of Agriculture, the Forest Service, Oregon Department of Forestry, UC Davis, and CAL FIRE from California. And we've been working together. Christine's leading that up, and we cooperate to share slides and make sure we are all up on the current messages. But I want to give her credit for leadership of that committee. The objectives today, I want to give you some background information on ambrosia beetles and their relationships with fungi. I want to talk about distinguishing features of Mediterranean oak borer infested trees and some ideas about the current status and recommendations and some investigations that we're doing, as well as instructions on how to report if you suspect that you're seeing Mediterranean oak borer in oak trees in your area. So the key part of the wood that ambrosia beetles are active in is the sapwood. The sapwood is the outer rings of the wood, and it's where the tree carries water from the roots up to the crown of the tree. Now, ambrosia beetles tunnel straight through the bark and occupy the sapwood. And so the picture on the top, if the bark is on the left side, the bark's fallen off, but the tunnel goes straight into the sapwood. They don't mess around with the bark or the phloem, just straight into the sapwood. And they don't penetrate into the heartwood, which is inactive interior to the sapwood. They cultivate a fungus to eat, and that fungus is what's staining the wood black along their tunnels. They carry the fungus with them. They have some special pits on their bodies and the spores stick to them as well, but they actively plant the fungus inside these tunnels, and that's what the baby beetles eat. The staining reduces wood value, and you can't export infested wood. But that's our native ambrosia beetles really just infest dead trees and are an issue of wood quality. And they, so if you're cutting trees, you want to get your wood get the logs out of the wood fairly fast. If you operate a mill, you want to control your inventory so these logs aren't sitting around and being exposed to the native ambrosia beetles that would come in and dig these tunnels. You can see that the boring dust from their tunneling is white, the color of wood. It's not red, the color of bark. It's white, and there's huge amounts of it as they're building these tunnels and emptying them out of the wood. There's generally no pitch involved because they're focusing on dead wood. These are our native beetles that just focus on dead wood. Now, in the last couple of decades, there's been a real big change in the world of ambrosia beetles, that there are non-native ambrosia beetles that not only do they carry fungus that infests the trees and stains the tunnels, but these are pathogenic tree-killing fungi that the beetles are carrying. The beetles also are targeting live trees. So they'll infest the tree, they'll start digging their tunnel, and they'll inoculate it with this tree-killing fungus. An example of this is a disease called laurel wilt. It was detected about 20 years ago when the red bay ambrosia beetle and a fungus that it carries called Rafaelia lauricola were detected in southern Georgia and northern Florida, and they've been killing the red bay trees and expanding from the coast where they were first detected. This fungus and beetle combination also affects sassafras trees and avocado trees. So because it's been here about 20 years, there's things we can learn from observing what's happened in this system. The Mediterranean oak borer has a beetle in the same genus. Xyloborus monographus is the beetle, and it carries several fungi, but the two most serious pathogens are Raffaella montitii and Fusarium solani. And the hosts are that have been observed in the United States are valley oak and blue oak, and a few Oregon white oak. In California, in Sonoma, Napa, and Lake counties. There's also been a little infestation in Sacramento. Probably someone brought firewood into the city. Oregon white oak is susceptible to these pathogens. We've tested seedlings in a laboratory, and when you scrape the bark and put the fungus on the tree seedling, it penetrates into the seedling's tissue and kills the seedlings. And beetles have been trapped and infested trees have been observed in Oregon. So the native distribution of the Mediterranean oak borer and its fungus is that it's native to Europe and North Africa and the Middle East. And it was detected in Napa, California in 2017. It was probably present since the 2010s. In Oregon, it's been detected between 2018 and 2023. Adult beetles have been found in traps in northwestern Oregon. You can see the red colored counties: Multnomah, Clackamas, Marion, and Washington counties. In 2022, there were infested trees found in Wilsonville. Wilsonville's a town about 20 miles south of Portland along I-5. And those beetles were confirmed in 2023. There were also infested trees confirmed in Troutdale, Multnomah County, one infested tree in Troutdale, and a suspected tree in Salem. And both trees were destroyed in 2023. The tree in Salem, there was wood collected from that tree, and it's been in what are called emergence traps, waiting to see if any beetles come out of it. So far, there haven't. So maybe that's kind of a false positive for Salem, but definitely the tree in Troutdale was full of beetles. Troutdale's right along the Columbia River, just a little bit east of Portland. One thing that's interesting, the beetles that have been collected in Oregon are different than the beetles that were collected in California. This picture shows the Oregon pins are green, and the beetles came from France and Germany, whereas the populations in California are represented with the orange pins, and they came from France and Belgium. So there's probably been several introductions to North America, and it's not just a case that the beetles in California got carried up to Oregon. We don't have any idea what the pathway is for these beetles getting to North America. Untreated wood imports, firewood, which would not have, come from Europe. Maybe some nursery stock could carry these beetles and their fungi. I did kind of look on the internet, and this picture on the lower right is barrel staves, and people buy barrels for planter boxes and for furniture making. And you can buy barrels, old white oak barrels from Europe and have the pieces brought over here for your hobbies. So a little bit more about this this beetle, Xyloborus monographus, Mediterranean oak borer. It's a wood-boring ambrosia beetle that feeds on fungus. It doesn't feed on wood, it feeds on this fungus. It attacks oaks, primarily white oaks. So those are trees that leaves have kind of a curved lobes rather than pointed lobes on the leaves. And it may be able to attack some red oaks. I'll talk about that in a minute. It vectors these fungi, Raffaella montitii and Fusarium solani, into the sapwood, and that causes a fatal oak wilt disease. Somehow it clogs up the sapwood and it prevents the tree from moving water and kills everything that's distal, that's farther out from the infestation along a branch network. And then it works its way down the trunk and kills the whole tree. The females are active and can fly most of the year. We had some detection traps out in Wilsonville in January. We just got a few days of warm weather above 60 degrees, and there were beetles flying at that time and were caught in the traps. Oregon can probably sustain 2 or 3 generations of these beetles a year. So there's the potential for them to be quite abundant and prolific, and the trees to be exposed to infestation throughout the year. They're really tiny.
Karen?
Thank you, Maria. In its native range, they feed on weakened oak trees, harvested logs, fallen limbs, occasionally get into maple, walnut, beech, elm, cherry, chestnut, hornbeam. In California, we've just seen them on valley oak and blue oak. There was one California black oak that was infested. It's a red oak, but that tree was really dying already. And so it doesn't really seem like a peril to red oaks. It also in California has been seen in fire injured Oregon white oak. And then in Oregon, so far, just Oregon white oak have been observed. Here, the left side shows the range of Oregon white oak from British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and California. I'm also interested in what might be active on the right side. Canyon live oak is kind of an intermediate between red and white oaks, and I wonder if that also might be a common host. Oregon white oak is really important in forest ecosystems. The trees can live up to 500 years. They're the primary tree in prairie systems, very drought tolerant, have been highly recommended for drought resilience, and an important wildlife resource because of especially the acorns. They're wildfire tolerant, and they're deciduous, which means they aren't damaged by defoliators as much. So here are some symptoms. The dieback on the left, dieback of a section of the crown, such as whole branches. So the beetles infested first up high in the crown, and they work their way down these branches towards the trunk. And so big sections of the crown will die. There's also abundant white frass, this boring dust that's produced. You probably won't see entrance or exit holes because they're so tiny, and then these black tunnels that cross each other in the sapwood. Here's another picture of the dieback of a tree. That's probably the symptom that you'll see first and notice first. Here are a couple of trees from Oregon. Again, abundant frass. So this white boring dust will be accumulate at the base of the tree and in the mosses and spider webs. Black tunnels in the sapwood. And there are many things that cause damage to oaks, but I want to call your attention to picture number 4 in the middle of the bottom. That's damage from squirrels. and they go out to the ends of the branches and girdle the twigs right out at the end. You can see how these are scattered over the tree. It's not a big section of the canopy, so it's not Mediterranean oak borer. The things to do to manage Mediterranean oak borer, mostly promoting tree health. In the native range, it only affects trees that are already weakened or broken. And probably here, maybe a slow, deep watering regime for the oak and preventing damage to oak like construction damage. Nobody's recommending that you remove the trees in a preventative way. If you do have infested trees, they should be cut to the ground and chipped or burned on the site, or covered and transported to an incinerator. Because you're dealing with a pathogenic fungus, your tools should be sterilized with 70% ethanol, 5% bleach, hydrogen peroxide, or Lysol. Some of the work that's being done right now, there's detection trapping occurring in 2024 to see if more areas can be spotted. They're doing some tests with insecticide plus a fungicide. The insecticide that's being used is imamectin benzoate, which is injected, and the fungicide is propiconazole, and that has a special license in the southeastern United States to protect avocado against the laurel wilt disease. We're not doing that here in Oregon. Something we are doing in Oregon is testing a volatile repellent, piperitone, which is kind of a fake, an artificial menthol, and it's being used to see if we could repel trees. There's also studies of the flight period. CAL FIRE is testing whether tarping can reduce populations. The other work that's needed is whether pathogens can spread via the roots or chips, whether you can prune away infested sections of the trees, and whether water regimes will help. Here's the current infestation area: Tualatin to the north, Wilsonville, and of 346 trees that have been infested, there's about 35 that are still there. And the last slide I'll show is that this big red area, if you suspect that you have Mediterranean oak borer, the best ways to report it are through the Washington Invasive Species Council or the Oregon Invasive Species Council's report and invader hotlines, and that'll get attention really quickly. Photos really help, and I appreciate your attention. Thank you.